Hey everyone, Pastor George here with today's Bible study recap. And today in Bible study, we looked at Joel chapter 3. So, Joel is all about the day of the Lord, right? We all agree on that. That's what I preached about on Sunday, of course. And the end of Joel is all pointing to the future day of the Lord and the judgment of the nations. And this is the end of the book of Joel, right? It's only 3 chapters. So, if you were to listen to my sermon on Sunday and read that text, during the worship, as I did, and then read a few more, read the rest of chapter 2, and then read chapter 3 today for Bible study. You'd read the entirety of the book of Joel. So if you're going through the Bible with us, this is a really easy book to get done in just a few minutes. Honestly, half an hour if you really want to take your time and sit with it, which I think you should. Of course, part of the problem always with the prophets is context, right? And so there is this. This is an important part of Joel here, and the nations that are going to be judged. Because in my sermon on Sunday, I spoke about this, and this is kind of the important part, right? Is like, when is this taking place? Is this taking place in the 800s, or is it taking place much later in the few hundred years before Jesus, BC, right? Is it, what's going on here? And a lot of that comes down to this, where it's talking about Greeks. Greeks weren't really known in the 800s, but also you have references to Tyre and Sidon and Philistia. And while Tyre and Sidon are still relevant much later, Philistia is been gone for quite some time by this point. No, that region still existed, or whatever else, right? But what is this about? Well, this is about a future day of the Lord, the day of the Lord, right? When God will come to judge all of the nations. So you saw, like in chapter 1, it talks about kind of the day of the Lord is this locust swarm that comes. Chapter 2 talks about the day of the Lord that's coming to judge Jerusalem if they do not repent. And day 3 is about this future day of the Lord where he will hold everyone accountable for the things that they have done, right? And so this is where you have the Lord bring judgment upon the world for all the evil things that have happened. And you actually see him, challenge people, right? And this is 9 and 10. You'll have a reverse of what you see in Isaiah and in Micah, where it's, they beat their swords into plowshares. God challenges his opponents to do the opposite. Come with all of your might, all of your force. Come to face me at this valley of Jehoshaphat, this valley of judgment. Now, whether or not that's an actual place or because Jehoshaphat or Jehoshaphat, as we say in English, in Hebrew, just means the Lord determines. So, are they? Is it like they're? Is it a physical place where they're going to meet him? This is where some people will, especially with end time stuff, be like, oh, this is Armageddon or whatever, right? Or is this a more metaphorical one? I lean towards a more metaphorical reading of this within the prophetic tradition. And you have all of this leading up to God going to be judgment, right? The harvest is ripe, as it says here. The nations of the world have done wrong things, and God is going to come and bring his judgment to that. And he's going to hold the evil of the world accountable, right? So Joel is saying, he's not just doing this to you, Jerusalem, even though your evil should be held accountable, and he's going to hold it accountable. All nations will be held accountable by God. And then he moves on to talking about the glorious future, right? So God talks about what will happen. And you have this, like, I want to say Edenic, right? It's not like Eden is being remade, but it's like Eden. It's very, I think what did my editors here say? They say it's paradisical, right? Paradise-like. And you have all this water flowing, the mountains dripping wine, the hills flowing with milk, right? Of course, this isn't literalistic language of the hills literally dripping milk out of them, right? This is in the language of the people at the time, talking about the perfect world, right? In a place where all of this stuff was scarce. So this is, you didn't know if you were always going to have a good harvest or whatever, right? God will provide all of these things in abundance, right? Everything that you need will be provided for you. God will remake the world in a way we can't even understand, right? This is what Joel is saying here, and God is saying through Joel. He then says, Egypt shall become a desolation, and Edom a desolate wilderness, right? Egypt and Edom, Israel's kind of stereotypical enemies, I guess, in the early pages of the Bible, and Edom for much longer than Egypt, really. Um, right, they represent these nations that have turned away and have done evil and are going to be judged for it. Right, they will become desolate, while God's Israel will become fruitful and paradisical. Right? He says Judah will be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem to all generations. I will avenge their blood. Blood I have not avenged, for the Lord dwells in Zion. Right, so in Jerusalem is where God is. Jerusalem will be inhabited forever. Judah will be inhabited forever. Now, of course, right, we take this in relation to other parts of, the prophets, and then later in the New Testament with the teachings of Jesus and in the book of Revelation, right? This isn't speaking that the physical land is going to be inhabited forever, right? The earth is going to be remade. It's not even going to look like itself, but the idea, right, is that God is faithful to his covenant people. He is not going to abandon them. They will be successful and around forever, right? So Israel, believers in Yahweh, they are going to be around, but those who attack them, who try to destroy them, who turn away and do other evil things, God will hold them accountable for that. And that's how the book of Joel ends, right? Just a prophetic book about judgment, which is what this is about. But the ultimate upshot of judgment, right, is God's mercy and God's faithfulness, even through that judgment. So that's what we talked about today. I hope you found that interesting. I'll see you tomorrow for an episode of A New Thing, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and peace out.